I am going to read two great stories about Jinn and Afarit. Two unique stories that have been told. One is from close to my home country that happened in Estonia, and the first one is of a story of a visit to underground city of Jinn and Afarit. The first story is Beit al-Jinn in Baa'laback or Baa'laback. At one time, a large community of lower entities called Beit al-Djinn, House of the Jinns, strived underground near the ruins of the Roman temples of Baa'laback. The belt was guarded by three principal jinns who shape-shifted constantly during their first apparition or contact with human beings. According to a local legend, some of these lower entities were the remnants of the Afarit who had served King Solomon. One of the entrances leading to the Beit was situated under the massive stone of Hajarat al-Hubla. I graduated from high school at 17 and was free for a while. And I have thought about continuing with university studies. I was thinking about going to Paris for that purpose. But I haven't decided yet. I did not mind a little time off and enjoyed my temporary idleness very much. At that time, Master Lee was visiting us and as usual had an incredible, exciting plan for me. Have you ever been to Baa'laback? He asked. No, never. It's an interesting city, very old. There's a lot of controversy as to who built it though. Isn't there some historical evidence? Plenty, but there are four interpretations. The Christian Lebanese say it was built by the Phoenicians. The Muslim Lebanese prefer a theory claiming it was built by Jinn and Afarit. Some important occult leaders say it was built by Adam after he was kicked out of paradise. Well, and the Ulema, what do they think? I asked. The Ulema say it was built by the Anunnaki and the Proto-Phoenicians who lived on the island of Arvad and in Tyre. There is a lot of evidence in this direction. So I will see the ancient parts, of course. I would like to take you to a very special part of the city where the founding fathers of the Ulema used to meet thousands of years ago. Unfortunately, we no longer meet there because it's become a tourist attraction and state-controlled center of music and dance festivals. But surely that is not the reason for going, I said. No, it's not. I plan to take you to a secret underground city under Baa'laback and show you where the Anunnaki landed for the first time on Earth. Very few people know what is going under the modern city of Baa'laback. The first Anunnaki landing took place before the deluge. True, though they came again and again after the deluge as well. Before the deluge, when was that exactly? I asked. About 450 years ago, perhaps a bit longer. At that time, the Anunnaki created the humans. And what about God? I asked. Even though I had been taught a lot of the Ulema traditions and worldview, I never heard about the creation of the human race. No one ever heard of God 450,000 years ago. You start to hear about God only about 6,000 years ago, said the master. I have heard about the Anunnaki, so I could accept this without much trouble. So I went to find my parents and tell them about my upcoming trip. The trip from Damascus to the old city of Baa'laback could be accomplished in 2 hours. Or at least you could if you had a decent car. Since we have borrowed an old car that didn't use normal gasoline but rather employed diesel and made such a racket that it was even impossible to hear yourself think, and it went slow. And as I entered into the car, I saw a mysterious Sudanese man sitting in the back seat, dressed in ill-matching jacket and pants and scowling at us. At the master's request, he started to get out of the car to introduce himself. I watched the process in fascination, since he was not doing it quickly like a normal person, but instead was slowly extricating himself in stages, gradually disentangling himself like a huge snake. I have never seen such a tall man, or anyone as strange. He was about 7 feet tall, very thin, and his face did not look quite human to me, but like a giant from outer space. The bizarre apparition just stood there, looked fierce, and played with a string of amber beads. The master ignored his behavior and introduced us. "This is Taj," he said. His name means crown. He's joining us because he has the key to the gate of the secret city underground. He is also able to persuade the Jinn and the Afarit to open certain doors, which is quite a talent. I wasn't sure if the master was joking about the Jinn and Afarit, so I kept quiet, nodded at the Sudanese. Taj folded himself back into the car and sat beside me. The master went into the front seat, and the driver, who seemed to be normal and cheerful, greeted the master and me in a friendly way. I leaned forward and asked the master, would I be able to see Jinn and Afarit? "Yes, of course," said the master casually. "You can even try to talk to them if you like. The underground city is actually called the City of the Jinn and Afarit. Plenty of devils are there." Since these devils did not seem to frighten the master, I assumed he knew what he was doing, and I sat thinking about what my part could be in this unbelievable adventure. But I started to get irritated by what Taj was doing. He constantly played with his amber beads, clicking away on and on. "Why do you have to click these things all the time?" I asked. Taj seemed annoyed by my question. "Try them yourself," he said curtly, and handed them to me. I grabbed at them, and instantly a horrible electric shock went through my entire body quite painfully, and I cried out and threw the beads on the floor of the car. The master screamed at Taj, "How dare you? How many times did I tell you to never do that? Give me the beads immediately." Taj handed him the beads meekly enough and had the grace to look embarrassed. The master rubbed the beads seemingly absorbing and removing the energy, and then return them to me. You can try them now, he said. And don't give them back to Taj until I tell you to. Taj said nothing. He seemed unhappy in the car, constantly fidgeting, and couldn't sit still. Finally we arrived at Baa'laback, where now, said the driver. We are going to Athar, the ruins, said the master. That's a new place for me, said the driver. Should I ask for direction? There were a lot of people around. Some Arabs in traditional garb, some Europeans carrying backpacks and cameras. It was such a cheerful and normal place. And I thought of the festival and the music. How could there be Afarit&Djinn and all sorts of underground labyrinths in a place like that? When you are with Taj, you do not ask for directions, said the Sudanese with a superior air. The driver weren't convinced. Taj winked at me and stared at the driver's neck, concentrating. The driver suddenly started to beat his own neck, complaining how much he hated mosquitoes. I was certain there weren't any mosquitoes in the car, and I was sure that Taj created imaginary insects that were tormenting the driver. Taj, stop that nonsense immediately, said the master severely. Apparently Taj could send certain energy rays that had the capacity of annoying people. Taj stopped, gave the driver the directions. I went to Athar. First, let's go to the world's biggest stone, said Taj. We drove further, and as we turned the road towards the temple of Jupiter, I was shocked by the sight that met my eyes. It was a huge grey slab, partially buried in the sand, perfectly cut and smooth. It was man-made, not a natural formation, and a short distance from the temple. How had the stone gotten there? Who could have carried it? The stone was so immense that the stones of the Egyptian pyramids looked infinitely small if they were put next to it. The Stonehenge monoliths would look insignificant. And they were so old. How big is this stone? I asked truly. 1,700 tons, said the master. And it's handmade, isn't it? I said. Taj grinned and said, handmade, yes, but not by human hands. I was beginning to get the idea. Then who made it? It was part of the landing area used by the Anunnaki, said the master. There are 6 stones like it, only the Anunnaki could move such a slab. But I can make it fly, boasted Taj. You must be crazy, I said. You want to see? Sure, I said. I would like to see you do that. Well, but not when there are so many people around. Let's come back here at 9 o'clock. I will show you. The master had other plans. We have plenty of time to do what needs to be done. I would like you to meet Sheikh al-Husseini. This was the first time I met the great man, who later contributed greatly to my studies. We drove to the Sheikh's house. Their house was small and modest. built of stone with thick walls. The door was low, as was normal for middle-class Arab houses. Apparently the conquering Ottomans used to sweep into houses that had large entrances while riding on their horses, and thus be able to kill and destroy anyone and everything inside. The low entrances forced the rider to get off his horse first, making him much less dangerous to the inhabitants. In the big living room, which they called the door, many sofas were placed against the walls, arranged to each other. About 20 to 30 men were present, dressed in Arab robes and turbans. All were elderly with long white beards. The sheikh was sitting in the place of honor. When the master arrived, everyone stood up, repeating the word "Ustaz, Ustaz" to each other, meaning teacher. Someone pointed at Taj and said, "The Afrit is already here." I thought this description fitted Taj perfectly, but expected him to be angry. To my surprise, he seemed pleased by being called that name, and grinned like a happy child. We sat down and the man came to kiss the hand of the master. The light was low and only one lamp was turned on. But I could see that one person did not get up from his seat. I thought this was a strange behavior. I looked at him carefully and to my amazement recognized the old Tuareg whom I had met years ago in the souk in Damascus, the man who was cut in half. He recognized me as well, smiled and motioned to me to come and sit by him. I came, and he said jokingly, "Don't start searching for the rest of my body." I laughed a little guilty, because that was exactly what I was planning to do. At any rate, I could see nothing, since the long robe he wore covered everything. Everyone conversed in Arabic, which by now I spoke very well. And after a while the sheikh motioned most people out. 8 of us remained in the room. The master, Taj, and myself were the only outsiders. The sheikh, the Tuareg, and 3 other elderly Arabs completed the number of people who were permitted to attend. At that moment a man came from an inside room carrying a big copper pot full of steaming hot water. He put the pot on the table in front of the sheikh, addressing him by the title Mavlana. This title meant that you are ruler over me, and was used only to address kings, sultans, or prophets. I was surprised. This title belonged to very important people, but the house and everything it spoke of middle class. So what could this mean? The sheikh must have been a very important person somehow. I was sitting near enough to the sheikh to see everything very clearly, and waited for the things to come. The sheikh took 3 pieces of blank paper and threw them into the hot water in the copper container. The room was completely silent. No one moved except Taj, who whispered to me, "You are going to like what you see. It's fun, but don't move no matter what happens." I nodded and looked at the pot and sometimes at Taj for clarification. He assumed the role of my guide in the occult world, and I realized he knew exactly what was taking place. "Shush, just look at the container. Something is about to happen," he said. I went on staring at the pot. Suddenly, in a blink of an eye, the water in the container disappeared, and the 3 pieces of paper burst out of the container. They lined up in the air without any support, one after the other. They waved about for a few seconds, then merged and became one larger piece. The piece of paper started swirling in the air, rotating around itself, quicker and quicker, and suddenly stopped in mid-motion. It was suspended in the air, completely still, and in a flash, letters appeared on it, printed clear black, and easily visible from where I was sitting, though I could not make out the words. The sheikh got up, approached the paper, read the words, and then asked one of the people attending to close the shutters on all the windows. The room became very dark, and the words, seemingly separated from the paper, glowed in air like a bright hologram. The sheikh called Taj and asked him to read the words. I could not hear what they said to each other, but they seemed to agree on something, as they stood there nodding their heads. Then Taj came back to me. I asked him, what was that? He stepped on my foot to quiet me. His large foot imprint was painful, so I shut up. Everyone else seemed to accept the phenomenon without trouble, and gazed at the sheikh as he began to move in a strange manner. He looked to the left, mumbling something incoherent, then to the right, saying the same incomprehensible things, repeating the sequence twice. Then he lifted his hands as if in prayer, in the manner shared by both Jews and Muslims, touching his chest and pushing his hands in front of him. He said, Ahlan, 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 Besalama. The letters were still glowing in front of him in the air, and he added, Ashma o Hushma Achtsabha. I turned and pinched Taj, whispering feverishly, Explain. Don't you know anything, said Taj. These are the names of 7 Afrit. They are going to open the gate of the underworld for us. But he stomped on my foot again and shut me up. And it really hurt, and I kept quiet. The sheikh said rather loudly, Bakur, Bakur. A man appeared out of nowhere and brought an incense holder. The sheikh moved it back and forth, the room filled with smoke, and everyone started to chant and mumble very loudly. I understood nothing at all what they said. It seemed they were speaking in tongues, and the effect was frightening. They went on for a couple of minutes, then stopped abruptly. At that instant, the letters pulled together, became one shining ball of light of intense silver color, and zoomed out of the room into thin air. One of the people opened the shutters, and the late afternoon light streamed in. The sheikh put his right hand on his heart and said, Thank you 3 times. I was wondering who exactly he was thanking and who originally he was praying for, since he never used the words God, Allah, or any other recognizable deity name. I did not realize at the time that the Ulema, even when they were Arabs, were not Muslims, and had their own very different worldview. The master got up, everyone rose with him, their robes swishing and making a faint sound in the quiet room. The Tuareg floated in the air. I looked at him, doing my best to control my discomfort. His upper body was solid, but the bottom half of the robe was obviously empty as it swirled around him, making the absence of his lower body extremely and disturbingly clear. He seemed like an apparition, a ghost. Everyone came to the mast, they bowed to him, and then grabbed his hand with both of theirs, in a way that was clearly ceremonial. The right hand's thumb was hitting the spot between the thumb and first finger of the left hand, and then the left hand covered the right hand. The Tuareg floated near the master and did the same thing. Everyone looked at each other and thanked each other a few times, following their ranks with the words Rama-Ahab. I did not know this word, and was not aware that they were speaking in Anak, the language that was shared by the Anunnaki and the Ulema. And yet I sensed that there was something very special about the way they spoke, as if by instinct. I was staring at the people and trying to understand their words until the master tapped me on the shoulder and told me to come out. Tosh left me and said, "You talk too much. You should be paying more attention. Such an occasion is not likely to happen again." I shrugged, but I had to admit to myself that he was right. These events were probably unique. To my surprise, I was beginning to like the Sudanese, and no longer felt threatened by his strange appearance and bizarre behavior. "Won't you tell me a bit about the Afrit?" I asked. "I'm not sure why we need to call them. Why can't we just go into the underground city? I don't quite understand anything that is going on here." "In your home, do you have a jaras, a bell, on your door?" he asked. "Yes, of course," I said. "Well, you see, the underground city do not have a jaras, and it is locked. If you want to come in, someone must let you in. The Afrit can help you, but you have to call them in a special way. Otherwise they don't know you want them to open the door. How would they know? They are not too clever." "Where is the door?" I said. He pointed to the ground. "Under you, under the house, there is a door. Right under the Sheikh's house. A door to the Abu, the deep abyss. It is also called Dalecht, meaning the underground labyrinth. Are there any other doors?" "Likely, but I only know this one." One of the people came out of the house, motioned to us to come in, and said, "We are ready." In the house, everyone was wearing a white robe, and to my surprise, their heads were covered with the type of headscarf Jews sometimes wore in the synagogue. To confuse the issue even further, one was holding a scroll that resembled a Torah. I felt desperate. Were they going to delay our journey again and start praying? I really wanted to see the Afrit and the adventure. Thankfully, one of them handed me a robe and commanded me to go change my clothes. But Tosh did not change his attire. I asked him why he was not required to do so, and he explained that he was not one of the Al-Munawwarin, or the enlightened ones, so he was not required to wear the special outfit. This did not really clarify the matter, since I was not one of the enlightened ones either. Tosh seems to be right about the door being under the Sheikh's house, because we started to descend the steps to the basement. The basement was long and narrow, and had a very high ceiling, perhaps the height of 2 stories. Everything, floor, walls, ceiling, were made entirely of grey cement. It smelled of dampness and was very cold. We went through one room after another, all narrow and long, eventually reaching a small room that had an iron gate by its far wall. The sheikh opened the gate with a large key, and behind it was a second door made of thick wood. A second key opened this one. Suddenly a thought struck me. Why did he need a key? Why couldn't a man who had such a supernatural power simply command the doors to open, or pass through them like a ghost? I expressed my thought to Taj. It won't work, said Taj. Yes, of course the sheikh could pass through doors, but how would he take you with him? What do you mean? I asked. You are not enlightened as yet. You cannot use supernatural means of transportation at this stage, so if he wants you, or me for that matter, to pass through these doors, he must take you inside in a normal way. If he tried, you will just bang against the doors and hurt yourself, while he would be on the other side. I began to see that Taj was not stupid at all, childish, but deep down he was extremely knowledgeable. We stood together in the small room, exactly like all the other rooms in the basement. The sheikh said, "Let the boy be the last one. He needs protection. Taj, come here." Taj joined him at the front of the line, and we entered a long corridor. And as we were walking, the corridor began to shift its shape. I felt seasick, nauseated. My balance was lost. The floor and walls, everything was moving, rolling, undulating. I did not see clearly and wondered how long this torment would last, when suddenly all movement stopped. I looked around and nearly jumped with terror. The simple corridor became a cave, a natural cave, not a man-made structure. Stone, dirt, and natural formations were all around me. It smelled damp and filthy. Water were oozing from some of the walls, and the light was dim. I did not like the place. The master told everyone except me to stand in a crescent-shaped row and hold hands. He ordered me to stand behind the crescent and not to touch anyone. I was hurt. I felt neglected, as if I were not part of the group, until one of the people turned to me and said kindly, "Don't be upset, my boy. This is for your protection." So I just stood there behind the people, feeling silly in my long white robe, but not unhappy anymore. At that moment, Taj made a sweeping motion with his handsome body and screamed a few words. The horrible sound he emitted was not human. It was very likely the loudest sound I ever heard. He continued to move his hands violently, grabbed some dirt from the ground and threw it up in the air. He pronounced the word that to me sounded like a name, and followed by the word Echda 3 times. Then he said Odku 3 times. Immediately, a rubbery kind of form moved to the left, changed to pus-like substance, and attached itself like glue to the wall. The sticky pale mess looked like some sort of ectoplasm. Taj repeated his actions a few times, manifesting a new ectoplasmic manifestation the wall with each call. Then he looked at the sheikh and said, "Tamam." The sheikh and Taj were engaged in a conversation in low voices. They seemed to be in agreement, since the sheikh said, "Yes, go ahead." Taj just advanced towards the ectoplasmic forms, put his hand in his jacket's pocket and took something out, and gave some to each of them. At this moment the sheikh stepped forward, ready to take over, and he said, "Ibris." The forms burst into flame, which burnt the ectoplasm and produced a thick fog. From the fog appeared the human forms, but they were only 6 of them. The sheikh said, Wavsabe. The master came forward, stood by the sheikh, and the sheikh repeated the word, adding, Ana amorekum, and the seventh creature came. Later, Taj told me that these Afrit were originally created by the sheikh for a reason, as usually they are, and in the normal state of events, were supposed to become the sheikh's loyal servants. However, the sheikh made a mistake and did not perform the exact requirements needed in the procedure of the creation, and therefore he lost control over the Afrit. The result was disturbing. The seven Afrit developed independent and rather evil habits and did not quite obey the sheikh as they should. For some reason, the only one who called them to appear was Taj. However, that is all he could do. Since Taj was not an enlightened one, he could not control them once they came, and to a certain extent was at their mercy and had to have an ulema present if he were to avoid potential harm. As for another ulema controlling them instead of Taj and the sheikh, that was not possible. The ulema have four categories based on their form of existence. Some ulema are physical and live as humans, like the master and the sheikh. Some used to be physical but were no longer so. Some, like the Tuareg, straddle both forms. Others have never occupied a human form. All four versions of the ulema can exercise immense powers, no matter if they are physical or non-physical. But a physical ulema can only control non-physical entities, such as these Afrits, if he was their creator. I shuddered as I watched the Afrit at the point of my studies. I had my share of supernatural incidences, but I have never been so shaken before. In the semi-darkness of this miserable, damp place, the Afrit were truly terrifying. Each had a more or less a human face, but in this almost normal face, the eyes were not at all normal. Instead, each Afrit had two circular orbs, with white background and a black pupil that stood out as if painted. The eyes did not move. If the Afrit wanted to look to the side, it had to move its whole head. The head was not connected to the body. Instead, it floated in disconcerting, eerie fashion just above the body. When the Afrit manifest, the bodies often appear first, and for a few minutes appears headless until they choose to manifest the head. This fact, coupled by the appalling ugliness, can frighten a human being to the point of death. There had been recorded incidents of people dying of heart attack or stroke caused by such events. I kept myself as calm as possible and continued to study the Afrit. The heads were bad enough, but the bodies were even worse. They were tinted a shadowy, ugly dark color. The torso resembled the shape of a bat. Their arms were attached to the back of the body, and the hands had extremely long fingers. Since the Afrit don't eat or breathe, they don't need a stomach and a diaphragm. Therefore, the body had a sort of visible cavity in the front, where these organs would have been. The legs were twisted like entangled wires, which must help the Afrit as they jump. They rarely stay in one place for long and keep shaking and moving and twitching. They look back at us, their ugly faces twisted in a devilish, vicious smile. They kept chattering among themselves and pointing at us with their long fingers. But Tosh told me that despite their apparent boldness, they were afraid of the enlightened ones. Any Afrit can see the shining auras of the Ulema, and for some reason they are terrified of these auras. The Sheikh commanded the Afrit to open the door. I did not understand the language he spoke, but I figured it out because he used the word Babu, which is similar to the word Ba'ab. Babu is really a door, though, while Ba'ab is a gate. But the words were close enough to make it clear to me that they were going to open the door to the underground world. I was speechless with anticipation. Everyone stood still, looking at the far wall of the cave, so I stared at it too, not knowing what to expect. The far wall of the cave suddenly collapsed in total silence. It felt like a silent movie because there was no dust and no sounds of falling stones during the procedure. The stones tumbled down quietly one by one, disappearing altogether rather than forming a solid pile. The wall was replaced by a dark hazy fog that allowed us a glimpse of something far away buildings. Now, said the Sheikh to Taj, let's follow the Afrit, but don't let them play tricks on you. Taj nodded. We went through the fog, following another corridor and crossing identical rooms that seemed to follow each other in succession, all the while seeing the far-off buildings in the distance. The Sheikh started reciting something. The Afrit were jumping up and down like carousel horses while pushing forward with great speed, and were already a good distance away from us, going on their own mysterious errands. Taz said to me, you can now move to the front, it's safe now. The Afrit won't pay much attention to us anymore. I quickly moved near the master at the head of the line, and no one took notice of what I was doing. We did not move on yet. The Sheikh asked Taj to show him a piece of paper he was holding, probably a kind of a map, and asked, do you know which room we need? Yes, said Taj, I know exactly where it is. It's very near us. I go in, and if I find something, I will bring some pieces back to you so you can see them. And then we can all go in and bring everything. Taj left for about 5 minutes and returned with a beautiful pearl necklace, a few diamonds, and some Phoenician coins. He told the Sheikh and the master, we can go in now, but remember, you promised that all the gold belongs to Taj. Of course, said the Sheikh casually, but remember, said the master, we are not just going into the treasure room. You will also take us to the other room as you promised. It was clear to me that the Ulema were not in the least interested in the treasure, but there was something else in this underground cavern that meant much more to them than any gold or diamonds. The Ulema do not need gold. They can manufacture whatever wealth they need, and they never manufacture or acquire more than they need. Riches are of no interest to them at all. Certainly I will take you to the other room, said Taj. I know exactly where it is. We followed Taj into a small closed room. It had no windows but was brightly lit, allowing us to see gold, gems, diamonds, and pearls, stashed in boxes, jars, or simply thrown on the floor in heaps. What I wondered about was the source of the mysterious illumination. No windows, no lamps, no candles, but bright light in every corner of the room. What could cause this? Suddenly I realized I had to be the same type of light that was discovered in the pharaonic tombs and the catacombs of ancient Egypt. Originally, The archaeologists who went there were baffled by the light in the Egyptian tunnels until they discovered the contraption that the ancient Egyptians had created. They found conical objects that functioned like modern batteries, producing light that was so much like normal electrical light that there was hardly a difference. Taj pointed at the door that would take us to the room the master wished to visit. The master asked him, "Do you want to come with us?" "I will follow you as soon as I'm finished here," said Taj, grinning. He pulled some linen bags from under his jacket and busily started filling them with the treasure. The master smiled indulgently at him, as if Taj was a child. He said to the rest of us, "Well then, let's go to the next room." We opened the door. Inside it was pitch black, but the master stepped in without the slightest hesitation and we followed. I envied his confidence. But since no one else showed fear, I went with them. We could see nothing, but the master kept talking to us, so we were able to follow him, and all of a sudden bright light filled the room. I blinked a few times and then saw the master standing by one of the walls holding two conical golden objects in each hand, positioned against each other. It was right here. They were the ancient batteries. The room was empty of furniture other than a beautiful wooden table carved in arabesques much like Moroccan furniture. The master placed the batteries on the table, making sure the alignment followed them to continue produce light. I looked around. Other than the batteries on the table, the only object was a large Phoenician urn standing in one of the corners. "We are going to leave you here for a short while," said the master to the group. "The sheikh and I are going to get the materials we need for our project." "We'll be right back," he added. There were Jinn and Afrit here. Wasn't anyone concerned about these devils? The master and the sheikh walked to the end of the room very slowly, with measured matching steps, as if choreographed. Then they reached the far wall, and literally went through the wall to the other side. I was not exactly shocked, since I have seen the master go through walls before. It is an interesting phenomenon, but not as mysterious as one might think. To put it simply, the Ulema know how to control molecules. The master had explained to me thoroughly. And everyone knows that there is plenty of empty space between the molecules of any matter, and the Ulema make use of the fact with a specialized procedure. And the person who wishes to cross approaches the wall will gradually become soft, and its molecules fragment themselves, and the human body simultaneously does the same. The spaces between the molecules both grow and readjust. The person and the wall keep their shapes for an instant, then the molecules mingle and allow the passage. At that moment the person passes to the other side, the molecules separate, and both wall and person become solid and normal again. The rest of us waited for half an hour. I was beginning to worry. The sheikh said they would be right back. Something must have gone wrong. Perhaps the Afrit, who had now completely disappeared, took them away, kidnapped them, or done something else horrible. I asked some of the other people if they were worried, but they had no idea where the sheikh and the master went, but they weren't worried. They just said that they trusted these two to know what to do. They can handle a lot worse than those stupid Afrits, they said. I don't wish to contradict, sir, I said, but these Afrits seem pretty dangerous to me. The others laughed at me. I have seen the Sheikh and Master handle much worse entities, says this man who spoke to me very kindly. Remember, the Afrits are cowards. They are mortally afraid of the auras of the Ulema. But I understand the Sheikh needs some help because of the way he handled their creation, I said. Yes, this is true, said the man. These Afrit did not turn out a bit wild, but with the Master there, they will never dare to harm them. So I had to be content with that. So I went out to search for Taj. I called him and was about to re-enter the room, but I heard him scream, "Don't come here," and he tumbled out of the room, bleeding, and slammed the door behind him. The Afrit beat me, he gasped, beat me very badly. But Taj, you could handle those 7 Afrits so well. What happened to give them power over you? 7? Are you joking? There is a colony here, something like a 40 or 50 Afrit, and they all rushed at me and would not let me take the gold. Is it their gold? I asked. What do they want it for anyway? They don't need money. No, it's not their gold. It used to belong to the Phoenicians and now it belongs to no one in particular. But the Afrit like to play with it. They like shining things. But you are holding one bag filled with their gold, I see. Yes, I managed to say one bag. They got all the others, those slimy devils. Never mind, though. After all, I will be a very wealthy man even with just one bag. This treasure is amazing. Anyway, we must secure the door. Hold the bag for a minute. He pushed the bag in my hands, turned and repeated the same words he used when he originally called the Afrit, and gestured in the same way. While he was doing that, I heard squeaks and screams, which he later explained was the way the Afrit spoke as they were chased away. That is that, he said, surveying the door with satisfaction. They won't bother us again. He took the bag and smiled at me through the caked blood and filth on his face. A successful treasure hunt, Germain, and someday I come back for more. Back in the other room I saw, to my relief, that the Sheikh and the Master have returned. The Sheikh was holding a stack of 40 or 50 sheets made of shiny plastic or glass, and the Master had the same size stack but of different type of material, brownish yellow like corn. What is that? I asked Taj. I have no idea, said Taj. They only told me which room I was supposed to take them to, but they did not tell me what project they were engaged in, I must say. I had a hunch it's something terribly important. And I thought so too, since the Sheikh and the Master seemed to be extremely solemn and everyone else was completely silent. There was a strong feeling of expectation in the room. They each put his stack on the table, the Sheikh on the right and the Master on the left, leaving a space between the stacks. And I noted the space matched the sides of the stacks. The Master brought the urn from the corner of the table and made a motion of pouring something out of the urn into the space between the stacks. I saw nothing coming out of the jar, but I figured that it might be an invisible substance. This went on for about 20 seconds, then the Master returned the urn to the corner. The Sheikh took one sheet from his stack and put in the space between the stack. Master then took a sheet from his own stack and put it on the shake sheet and waited a couple of seconds. Then the master flipped his sheet backside up, and to my absolute amazement, there was a print on the sheet, strong and black, consisting of strange symbols and letters I did not recognize. Piling the sheets on top of each other, they did the same to all of them. Surprisingly, the stack when finished was reduced in size to about the half of the original sheets, even though I could not see it reducing itself while it was worked on. I think that the sheets were absorbed into cone-like paper as the print was produced, but I am not sure. The sheik pulled out the silk scarf from his robe, put the stack on the scarf, rolled it, lifted the ends of the scarves and tied them together, all in a ritualistic way. Then he said, Alhamdu, twice. They turned to go and we left the room. The master throughout the entire time paid hardly any attention to me, which bothered me a little. I felt neglected, even abandoned. He must have noticed my unhappy face because he put his hand on my shoulder, took me back into the room and said, Look. To my amazement, the room was entirely empty. The table and the urn had disappeared. I was confused and uncomfortable. I could not understand why all that was necessary. Why Afrit? Why those doors? Where did the table go? What was this document? And why was it worth all his effort? He laughed at my questions and said, Look at the wall. The light was dimming as we spoke and finally disappeared. It seemed this adventure was over, and I said, rebelliously, that I wish things were made clear to me, because otherwise I have learned nothing. I will explain everything later, I promise. But what about the city you said we are about to see? The city where the founding fathers of the Ulema used to come to. So, you want to see more? This was not enough? Yes, I said. All I saw was that you and the sheikh going through a wall and Taj feeding with the Afrit. Well, he said, in this case, turn and walk with me. You are already walking in this city. I looked around and saw nothing, but he said, keep walking, it will come. I should have trusted him more fully. After all, when did he ever disappoint me? I felt remorseful as the miracle began to unfold in front of my eyes. But thankfully he did not hold my short-term rebellion against me and went on. Slowly the ancient city started to appear like a picture in front of me. The colors of the city were such as I have never seen before, glowing colors of incredible beauty. The master explained that this was because the city was located in a space that had the same temperature everywhere and no pressure on any object, unlike Earth. What do you mean, Master, when you say unlike Earth like that? Are we not on Earth? No, we have left the Earth when the Afrit opened the door and made the cave wall collapse. We are now in another dimension, said the Master. Everything looks like a little bit different here. The city became clearer and I thought it looked like a holographic projection, either from the past or from the future. The buildings, though beautiful, had sense of alien remote places. We were now walking in a well-illuminated street, the windows of the building shining with lights as well. The air was soft and fragrant. I see buildings and streets, I said, but we are the people. They are here, that they are invisible to you. Your eyes are not constructed to see them, not yet. Well, it's time to leave. Let's go up these stairs. We started climbing a very high stone stairway that led from the street into a destination that was not quite visible. I was surprised that we were not retracing our steps into the Sheikh's house, but the master said there was no need for that and that exits were available in various locations and not as difficult to achieve as entrances. So we climbed the stairs, and when we reached the top, I saw a huge grey wall on my left and noticed that the pavement turned into sand. The huge grey wall was the side of the Anunnaki stone. I understood that we were excited from a hole under the big stone, were out of a strange dimension and back to Earth. So that is what Taj meant when he said we would make the stone fly, I said. Yes, a rather poetic way of describing our trip, said the master. Master, I'm not wearing the white robe. I am wearing the normal clothes I left at the Sheikh's house. Indeed, and so is everyone else, he said, pointing to the rest of the company, who were already standing near the giant stone and wearing normal clothes. So what did we come here for? Surely we not just give Taj his treasure. We came for the book. Everything we did was much worth it. Even the encounter with the unpleasant and stupid Afrit. We have recently heard that the book was here, in this dimension, after having searched for it unsuccessfully for generations. And now we have recovered a copy of the most important book in the world. The strange book you printed from the stacks, what is it? It's one of the very few copies in existence. What it is probably the oldest book to ever have ever been written. A book the Anunnaki had valued very much. It's called the Book of Ramadosh. I don't know why, but a shiver went through my spine when I heard the name of the ancient book. The sound of the name triggered a reaction in my mind. For a second I had a feeling of tottering off the brink of a dawn-warm abyss that contained something older than the universe and glowed with endless stars. It passed quickly, and the master continued. In the future you will have the privilege of studying it. It contains the knowledge that may someday save humanity from its own folly. At least I hope so with all my heart. And that was the first story that's been told both by the Muslim and those who come from Eastern European countries. This story is. And the next is very dear to me since it was told to me by my Estonian friends. And it's the story of the Honorable Master Rabbi Mordechai and a very special kind of Afarit&Djinn who accomplish extraordinary things in Eastern Europe that will take your breath away. And this is also within Finnish, Estonian, Lithuanian folklore as well, this story. So this, and it binds together with all the others from like in stories from Hungary and Prague and so on. Helama-Gooliim.Master Builders Extraordinaires. Helama-Gooliim is the name of a very special and particular Jin Afarit entities who were created by Anunnaki Ulema for the sole purpose of performing a good deed. They are part animal, part human, part Golem or Golem, part Ghoul, a hybrid race. So they are not really golems, so this is interesting. They are made of clay or earth materials, much like all of us, but they have certain physical differences from both humans and animals. They look exactly like normal people. They have eyes, hands, feet, and so on. They are not at all like machines or robots. You will not think of them anything but human if you saw them, said Ulema Mordechai. They are born full adults. They are sensitive to light, so they work only by night. But they are nevertheless great engineers. Ulema Mordechai stated that when the Ulema and some Kabbalists read the holy level of Kadash Daracha, they can create life, real life. The creatures would function much like human beings, but they have three deep fundamental differences. 1. They don't have a soul. 2. They don't have a physical heart that functions. And 3. They don't have a wired brain. Their essence comes from another dimension to which they return after their task is done. They are created for that task, and that is their only purpose. The Creator tells them what to do, and they do it right away. Rabbi Mordechai told me, in my case, I had created 4 of them to build houses for poor people in Estonia, and they did it very nicely overnight. The creation process of these entities. Ulema Mordechai continued, I create each of them separately. For each, I bring with me 7 pieces of papers, on which I write certain codes, and I have to have my cane with me. Then I take soil, earth or clay, and pour water on it to make it pliable. Once it's the right consistency, I mold it into a ball. I turn off most of the lights, leaving a very low illumination, maybe 1 candle or a small lamp, and pull back about 4 to 5 feet. Then I read a certain text that would encourage the ball to take the next step, which is to shape itself into an oblong of about 4 feet and be ready to follow my special design. At that point I take my cane, walk to the other side of the oblong, dip the cane into the oblong and stretch it. I command the oblong to duplicate the human form, and it becomes a statue, lifeless but similar in every way to the human form. I take the 7 pieces of paper and put 2 in the eyes, 2 in the ears, and 1 in the mouth, and 1 on the breast over the heart. I roll the 7th piece as it was a homemade cigarette, go to the other side of the statue and throw the rolled paper at it. It always lands either in the nose or between the feet, and either position is correct. The statue starts to move and attempts to stand up. At this time I turn around and leave the room for a few minutes, so as not to look at the statue as it comes to life. Seeing the actual transformation is forbidden by the code of the Ulema, as stated in the book of Ramadosh. I stand behind the door of the room and I wait until I hear the creature make a sound, which tells me that the procedure is complete. I go back into the room, welcome the creature, give it clothes to wear, and pull out all the papers to keep safely until such time as they are needed to disassemble the creature and send its essence back to its original dimension. I create them to do one single task. When the task is accomplished, I ask them to lie on the floor next to each other return the pieces of paper which they codes to the correct places, and pour water over the bodies. The bodies disappear, leaving earth on the floor, and the essence goes back to where it came from. Asking the Ulema, "Do they always go away peacefully?" He replied, "No, sometimes they develop a personality. If the task is a bit longer and they have the delusion of being human and want to stay in our dimension. Of course it would be cruel and inhuman to let them stay, not to mention dangerous. But they do become tricky, so the Ulema or Kabbalist must be even trickier, and hypnotize the creature into deep sleep. We then put the papers where they belong and set the paper on fire, and the body starts smoldering. At that time, we pour the water over them and they disappear. They built for me nice houses. The next morning, very early, I went to inspect the houses. I removed the great blanket that covered the area. The blanket is a large plasmic sheet that can create a shield of invisibility of the entire area. We just refer to it as a blanket because it's a short and easy name. Settling comfortably in his chair and sipping his coffee, Rabbi Mordechai said, "And now I promise to tell you the story of the houses I built. Do you want to hear it?" "Oh yes, I do." "I am not sure what you mean by building houses. I had no idea you worked in this line." "Well, I built houses, but I never laid my hands on a stone or a brick," he said, his bright eyes twinkling with amusement. "So you supervised the construction like an architect?" "Well, maybe it could be described that way." "You will be the judge. You see, the people I wanted to help were poor peasants. They had no money at all. They ate meat once a year, maybe, and some of them lived in groups of 8 to 10 in a small shack. I decided I had to build them more houses, give them decent living conditions. Luckily, there was a piece of land in the vicinity that did not belong to anyone. I went to look at it, make sure there was water around, so we could dig a good well. I found plenty of water, decided it was the right place, and then boom, overnight I built 10 houses. Come to think of it, I had some preliminary preparations to do, so it really was not exactly overnight, but more like 24 hours. But it takes more than 24 hours to build even a single room, let alone 10 houses. Did you have hundreds of people to help you? The work was done by 4 individuals and one enormous blanket, said Rabbi Mordechai. Getting them was what I referred to as preliminary preparations. Did you say blanket, Rabbi Mordechai? Or did I misunderstand you? What does a blanket have to do with building houses? No, you heard me right. The 4 individuals did not wish to be observed as they were building the houses. I sat there watching him suspiciously. Was he trying to confuse me? See how I would react to this fairy tale? Or perhaps it was some sort of test. Or maybe I was just so stupid that I did not understand. Rabbi Mordechai looked at me and said, I can see that you feel that 4 are not enough to build 10 houses overnight, right? No way, I said. For a really important good cause, I can use 1 individual to build something bigger than the Eiffel Tower and in seconds. Rabbi Mordechai was never drunk. My mother told me that he was a real Russian bear and could polish a whole bottle without any effects. So obviously he could not be drunk now. when all I saw him take was Turkish coffee. But for a few moments I seriously suspected that he was. Nor was he crazy. So what nonsense was he telling me? And then suddenly I remembered something that Mr. Markovich said. Rabbi Mordechai, he said, was an alchemist. It had little to do with building houses, but still as an alchemist he had powers. And then something else connected to it in my mind. He never said his helpers were for people. He said they were for individuals. Could these individuals be like the Afarit&Djinn? The thought was so sudden, so disturbing, that I was startled and looked at him with apprehension. And I think he read my mind, because he said, "No, they are not what you think. There are other souls, you know." I had no idea I knew anything about Ifrit, I said. How did you know I was thinking about them, anyway? Do you read my mind? No, I don't read your mind. But what you taught was very clear and showed on your face. And we masters all know about education and what people see and have witnessed. And I know that the first meeting with Afrit would make a strong impression on anyone, as will the stories. Anyway, my individuals were much better than the Afrit you heard of or seen. All Afrit are basically stupid, but mine at least listened and obeyed. Are they spirits? Are they humans? Part humans? What are they? I asked him. Mine are called Golem. The name sounds quite familiar, I said, but I can't quite place it. Yes, you are right, and it's a good observation. Indeed, the Golem are part animal, part human, part golem, part ghoul, a hybrid race. They are made of clay or earth materials, much like human beings, but they have certain physical differences from both humans and animals. They are born as full adults. They are sensitive to light, by the way, so they work only by night, but they are nevertheless great engineers. Where do you find them? I asked. I make them, said Rabbi Mordechai. You make them really? So they are like machines? They look exactly like you and me. They have eyes, hands, feet, and they are not like machines. You will not think of them anything but human if you saw them. I leaned forward, shaken but what I was beginning to understand. Can he do the impossible? Can he be playing God? So you actually create living, breathing, thinking creatures. Afrit are usually conjured spirits, but you are talking about something else, I think. A different level of beings. Yes, when the Ulema and some Kabbalists reach the holy level of Kadash Daracha, they can create life, real life. The creatures would function much like human beings, but they have three deep fundamental differences. They don't have a soul, they don't have a heart, and they don't have a brain. Also, their essence comes from another dimension to which they return after their task is done. They are created for that task, and that is their only purpose. The Creator tells them what to do, and to do it right away. In my case, I have created these 4 Golem to build the houses, and they did it very nicely overnight. Can you tell me how you create them? I create each of the Golem separately. For each, I bring with me 7 pieces of papers of which I write certain codes, and I have to have my cane with me. Then I take soil, earth or clay and pour water in to make it pliable. Once it's the right consistency, I mold it into a ball. I turn off most of the lights, leaving a very low illumination, maybe one candle or a small lamp, and pull back about 4 to 5 feet. I then read a certain text that would encourage the ball to take the next step, which is to shape itself into an oblong of about 4 feet, and be ready to follow my special design. At that point, I take my cane, walk to the other side of the oblong, dip the cane into the oblong and stretch it. I command the oblong to duplicate the human form, and it becomes a statue, lifeless but similar in every way to the human form. I take the 7 pieces of paper and put 2 in the eyes, 2 in the ears, 1 in the mouth and 1 in the breast over the heart. I roll the 7th piece as if it were a homemade cigarette, go to the other side of the statue and throw the rolled paper at it. It always lands either in their nose or between the feet, and either position is correct. That's when the statue starts to move and attempts to stand up. At this time I turn around and leave the room for a few minutes, so as not to look at the statue as it comes to life. Seeing the actual transformation is forbidden by the code of Ulema, as is stated in the book of Ramadosh. I stand behind the door of the room and wait until I hear the creature make a sound, which tells me what the procedure is complete. I go back into the room, welcome the creature, give it clothes to wear, and pull out all the papers to keep safely until such time as they are needed to disassemble the creature and send its essence back to its original dimension. And you do that after the task is done. Right, since the Golem are created to perform a single task. When the task is accomplished, I ask the Golem to lie on the floor next to each other, return to the pieces of paper with the codes to the correct places, pour water over the bodies of the Golem. The bodies disappear, leaving the earth on the floor, and the essence goes back to where it came from. Does it always go away peacefully, I ask. No, they sometimes develop a personality. And if they think they are human and have a delusion of personality and want to stay in our dimension, of course it would be cruel and inhuman to let them stay. Not to mention how dangerous it can be. But most of all, they become very tricky to handle. So the Ulema Kabbalists must be even trickier. And that's when the art of hypnotizing the creature into deep sleep comes handy. We then put the papers where they belong and set the paper on fire, and the body starts smoldering, and at that time we pour the water over the Golem and they disappear. It's so fascinating. I would love to witness the procedure, though I admit some of it would be terrifying. Thinking of the creature stumbling to its feet, trying to get up in a dark room. But still, I wish I could witness that. You will do better than just witnessing. At the right time, I will teach you the whole process, including the codes and the text that needs to be said, promised Rabbi Mordechai. I will know how to create life, really. Why not? Once initiated, you will advance. I tell you, think big. Expect everything grow. That is what I hope you will do. Anyway, the houses were built very nicely to these obliging Golem. And then, the next morning very early, I went to inspect the houses and removed a great blanket that covered the area. "What is this blanket?" I asked. "We are not talking about a real blanket, right?" "No, it's the sheet or a shield that creates a shield of invisibility over the entire area." We just refer to it as a blanket because it's short and an easy name. Anyway, someone saw the houses and informed the police, and soon enough I saw them advancing on me. Luckily, the captain was an old friend, Sergei, and he had 2 policemen with him. "What is this?" he asked me, surprised. He knew the area well and the houses did not exist the day before. "These are houses," I said. "Well, I see that, but how come? How did you occupy the land? How did you build, and what about license? Surely you don't have one. And who did you build it for? You know very well that you will have to abandon this property right away. You have no right to it," said Sergei. "Sergei, my friend, you are asking me too many questions. When your wife was dying and the doctors gave up on her, do you remember who saved her life?" "Why, it was you, Rabbi Mordechai," said Sergei. "Do you think I would ever forget that, or my wife for that matter? She never stops praising your name." "And did you ask any questions then?" "No, you were too happy to see her well, and anyway, if you had asked, I would not know how to explain it to you." "You just touched her and she stood up," said Sergei. "It looked like a miracle, so I did not want to interfere." That rang a bell. I remembered something. "Wait," I said to Rabbi Mordechai, interrupting his narrative. "That is exactly what the Master did for the sick nun, Sister Marie-Ange Gabrielle, who stayed in a house many years ago before he went to Damascus." "Very likely," said Rabbi Mordechai, annoyed. I am sure no one asked too many questions then either. Anyway, I told Sergei that I have done much more than just touch his wife, and I put my hand on his shoulder and explained something very important to him. "Sergei, everything I and anyone I touch, I only do it for humanity's good. These houses are for poor old people who have no place to live properly. And if I tried to explain you how I built them in one day, you would not believe me." "Problem is, Rabbi Mordechai, is that after what happened with my wife, I would believe you." "I don't know what to do," said Sergei. "You know that sometimes my methods cannot be explained. Remember when your daughter Irina was having trouble getting into the university? Remember how I transferred the money and got her registered from a distance, and when she got back to the university the next day, the secretary was amazed to see that all was written properly in her log, and Irina was registered a student who had paid her bills overnight." "So I say, don't ask questions, Sergei. What does it matter? The houses are here now, but you have no reason to worry. If needed, I can make the houses disappear. Close your eyes for just a minute." Sergei closed his eyes, and I restored the blanket. "Open them now, Sergei." He did, and practically jumped, so surprised he was. The houses were not there. The 2 policemen were so scared by this phenomena that they dropped their guns and ran away. Sergei stepped over and picked up the guns, automatically staring at the direction of the houses that were not there. "The fools," he said almost to himself. "They probably think it's the devil's work." But Rabbi Mordechai, all your work, making it disappear like that, how, why? I can bring them back, Mordechai answered. If you close your eyes again, I will do so. Sergei did, and the houses to return. Sergei was shaken. You are playing with my head, Rabbi Mordechai. Are you trying to scare me, said Sergei. I know you are not the devil, but honestly, so you can make them disappear and appear at will. Won't it be dangerous to the people inside? No, I can get them out first, I said. But what if my supervisors hear about it and come to inspect? You will give me a warning and I make the houses disappear. Ah, well, said Sergei, giving up. I close my eyes to the whole thing and tell my policemen that if they don't shut up, the devil will get them. What a story, I said. And did any trouble follow these events? No, strangely enough, nothing ever happened to disturb the people. I moved into the houses. Somehow the police never talked, and the occupants were safe. Of course, such houses built by supernatural phenomena are not permanent. They last 10 to 15 years, no more. But when they disappear, I will find another solution. And according to the Afarit, they are classified as Jinn in Islamic mythology. And these stories, they are alive and told in many different forms in Eastern Europe, Russia, and in the Islamic countries and so on. So they are quite similar. So be inspired, and this was 2 stories of, and all have been claimed to be completely true, and the Estonian one has her own life, just like the Golem in Prague. It lives on forever and forever and forever. Have a magical day. Bye for now.